Good evening, Scribe.
Good evening, Patty. Lovely to see you again.
So today I would like to talk to you about another book of yours.
Okay.
And it's my favorite one, so I'm really looking forward to that. Food Chain.
Food Chain, yes. A little bit of a departure for me. I looked at books that were out there and the styles that were coming to the fore, and there were an awful lot of erotic vampire settings, that type of thing. So I thought, well, what if we take it back to its most primal source? I don't want a fluffy vampire. In fact, I didn't want a vampire at all. However, I came up with the premise of perhaps it is not all mythology. People look at these things and people ascribe them, a place in folklore or history, mythical creatures. Lots of historical records of creatures existing that we know for a fact they actually didn't. But people believed, so they choose to believe. And I thought, right, okay, let's look at the premise that there was a creature that inspired the fear of vampires, the vampire legend as such. That folklore had, cloaked in certain aspects of romance and glamour, making him a king, making him a count. And let's say, okay, right, well, let's look at where it actually came from. What could have inspired that terror and that amount of gossip that has, carried on throughout the years. So I came up with the idea of Luke, the character in the book, the main character, who is ostensibly a creature that is part humanoid, part animal, part reptile, part many things. All the attributes that I gave him can be found in nature. There is nothing supernatural about any part of him. For example, his ability to climb walls. I put a description in of how a gecko uses an adaptation of scales on its feet to enable it to cling to quite smooth surfaces. So he has the same. His bite is venomous, but it works as a paralytic rather than one that kills. And of course, venoms like that exist in nature. So I tried to give him a natural basis, but roll him all into one, into a humanoid figure that had these abilities, which of course made him something different.
So he is not a demon or vampire. He's just a creature.
He is a creature. I didn't want to have any supernatural, apart from the fact he's very long-lived. But that is his nature. His time scale, is different from ours. He does age, but at a different rate. So I've tried to keep him as natural as possible, but then still give him abilities that would just horrify people. His ability to scale walls, his ability to paralyze with a bite and then do whatever he does to his victims while they are under the influence, shall we say. I give him the ability that, or an attribute of his scent affects the senses of people that are close.
That's my favorite part about him.
I wish we could buy that in a bottle, Patty, but we can't. However, there are creatures in nature that give off odours and give off scents that do affect normally the opposite sex within their same species. But they do have an effect that they make them respond in a more, shall we say, receptive manner than they were before. So I looked at keeping him natural, but making them preternatural, I suppose, is rather than supernatural. Rolling them all into one, into a pretty fearsome package. His sexual desires are very animalistic. It is a source of pleasure. That is it. There are no consequences, there are no emotions, there are no feelings, there is nothing involved in other than he eases his need, his ache. And unlike traditional vampires, for want of a better word, because he isn't a vampire, he eats his victims, or certainly portions of them that he finds tastiest. Because they are his food source. We are his prey. And he has been preying on mankind for thousands of years. I have left his origins pretty sparse, lost in the mists of time, so to speak, but I put some chronological dates in there and some details that I researched. To at least make it appear as though he lived through those times. He was there at those moments. When I brought him to London in the first book, I thought, well, where's a creature like this going to hide? In a city, where's it going to hide? And with a little bit of research, I discovered that there are areas of London that have been forgotten. Mainly parts of the Underground line, very early Underground railway lines. But there are still large sections of it existing. They're underneath modern buildings. A lot of these have been dug out and filled in with the foundations of modern buildings. But there are these places still in existence. We can't see them. We don't know they're there. They are listed. If you look for them, there are files existing that show you where they are. But the majority of them have been lost in time and space, and they are just there. And it's only the intrepid that go looking for them that actually find them. So I thought, okay, these places exist, so that's real. So we will use that as a lair for him from which to come out and treat the city of London as a new hunting ground, both for food and pleasure. So that is what we did, and obviously using his abilities to scale buildings, it soon became apparent. If you look at aerial maps of London, you could travel quite large distances just from rooftop to rooftop. Certainly when you're in the centre of London, in the old part of London, around where I based it, the financial quarter, the old city, as they call it. Are you banging your microphone there, Patty?
No.
Something just clunked in my ear.
I had to cough again.
Is that what it was? I shall forgive you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, I looked at the maps and thought, okay, you can travel across London using the rooftops. It is not, out of the realms of possibility, and it's, it is possible. Yes, as you move away from the older areas, that would become more difficult because of the introduction of roadways, obviously. Big roads, expressways, double-laned roads, wider areas that he would not be able to jump. He would have to come down and cross. So, of course, the possibility of discovery would be far greater. But where I'd based him around the old city and a lot of his hunting ground was around the West End, the theatre land of London. They are still parts of the old London, and you do get several blocks of buildings all running into one. So you can travel a fair distance staying off the streets. So that became more plausible. And as you know, as I write, I don't plan these books. I sit and write, and the story just comes out. There were times where I had to stop and do a little research, because the idea would flow through my head and I'd start typing it down and the story would be there on the screen and I would stop and look at it and think, is that a little far-fetched? Is that too ridiculous to be acceptable to a reader?
Was that ever the case?
Yes, there were a couple of instances. Obviously, I don't want to give spoilers, but there is an incident where he was being stalked, but then he turned into the stalker because he spotted the people waiting for him. And there were a couple of, I wrote probably 3 or 4 pages about the way that he crept up on these people. And it just became, I read it and I thought, no, that's absolutely crazy. He would stick out like a sore thumb. It would become, it was too obvious. So I just stopped and, looked at it 5-10 minutes and thought, no, that's not going to work. Scrubbed the pages and just carried on and started and rewrote that section as I went. It was more difficult when I completed book 1 and took him into book 2.
Because I haven't read that yet, so no spoilers.
No spoilers. Well, as you're aware, he goes to the New World. He goes to America, and the city that I picked is not one I visited. So it was once again back into the research. Look at the city, and fortunately, it had some history that I could use to create an environment that he could flourish. Obviously, as I was writing the story, I was putting him in places that I was describing, but I thought, do these actually exist? So I had to stop, go into do a little bit of research until I found somewhere that was very similar to the world I was describing at the time. And obviously inserted the name of this place, because then it would be recognisable if anybody looked on a map and think, oh yes, there it is. That's where the character was at the time. It taught me a little about the makeup of the city over there, the way it had expanded from the coast and sprawled out into the inland, and then had spread even further along the coast, spreading out sidewards. As I was reading and discovering about all the different areas that he would encounter while he was over there, obviously I needed to find out once again, was it plausible? Was I putting him into an area where it would, to anybody who knew that area, they think, no, that's ridiculous, he'd never get away with that. Though it is pure fiction, and obviously the story is completely from some dark recess in the back of my mind.
But there is no creature like that.
I would hope not, Patty. Or if there is, he stays an awful long way away from me. And anybody I know and care about. Because...
yeah, he's really evil.
He's not evil.
Yeah, no, not...
The concept of what he does is...
animalistic.
Yes, because that's one of the things I wanted to get around, Patty, was the fact that people have given vampires human characteristics. Yes, they are supposed to, at one point they were human and then they were turned, they were changed. But for a creature that survives by drinking the blood of its victims, people have given it a lot of pathos and a lot of angst. There seems to be an awful lot of...
And sparkles.
Yes. These vampires have an awful lot of remorse and... but I think that's people trying to humanise what is ostensibly a pretty horrible creature. Because obviously it removes life by draining blood, and if it so wishes can turn others into the same and condemn them to a life of eternity drinking the blood of fellow humans. So it's not a very nice creature, but it has been romanticised and it has been, as you say, sparkled. People have put glitter on it and turned them into something, dare I say, Twilight-ish. Can I maybe say that word?
I remember that it started earlier. Anne Rice, Buffy.
Yes, that's right. Yes, because didn't she have somebody that she was close to in Buffy? Angel, was it, or something like that?
Yes. Angel was the one who had a soul.
That's right, a vampire with a soul.
Yes, and that made him all cuddly and good and...
And I bet he was good looking as well, wasn't he?
Of course.
So I hate him even more now, and I have no idea what the character is.
But I never liked him. I liked Spike. Spike was the bad boy.
Right. Well, some of you girls, you go for these bad boys, don't you? That's why, Luke would fit into the current environment very well, because though he's not bad, as in mean and nasty, he just does what he needs to do. I gave him no morals that we would recognise. I gave him no emotions that we would recognise, that we would accept as being, something that you would hope that they would have. Because I wanted to keep him as basic and as raw as possible. Giving him feelings, which I did actually a little bit. I sneaked a little bit in, but it wasn't so much an emotion, an attachment. It was more an acceptance that situation worked, so do it again. Keep that situation alive because it worked, rather than basing it on an emotional pull.
It was like, that makes my life even more comfortable. I want to keep it. So pure, egoistic.
Yes, that's right. It was not intended to be a romantic attachment, and I hope it doesn't come across as that.
No.
Because I didn't want that other characters in the story developed along their romantic paths. So I did put a little romance in. People, I'm not all doom and gloom and squeals and shouts and whips and chains. I can do romance. So I wrote a little in, as a couple of the characters developed. But I didn't want it with him. I didn't want him to have all those attributes that seem to be given to a current spate of literary creatures. I didn't want that at all. So perhaps in some cases I've made him very brutal. But nature is red in tooth and claw, as the saying goes. It is brutal. And everything that he does to him is natural. There is no other reason than it enables him to live and function. And that appealed to me in the concept of the book. Is let's just strip away everything that we would expect as a human being, and let's just take it back to pure animal. So our instincts, his instincts, are as base as they could come. It is as natural as I could possibly make them. Even his requirement for pleasure is a natural thing. So it is, it is not anything that another creature would not do. And his view of humanity, of people, obviously is completely different from yours and mine. We are, to him, food and a source of pleasure to ease the needs that he has. And, of course, without trying to spoil anything, a source of either very special food or the possibility of increasing his own kind. And I shall say no more on that.
Oh, I forgot about that part.
So...
Yeah.
Yes, so I tried to keep... That's all I tried to do. The story came to me a while ago, but obviously, as people are aware, I write in a different genre. It is mainly pure erotica. Mm-hmm. And those are based on personal experience and personal journeys that I've made. Obviously, the stories are fictitious in a great deal of cases, but there's an awful lot of me in there. With this, I had nothing to relate to. I didn't want to study horror. I didn't want to study similar creatures. I didn't want to study how other people had done it. I just thought, okay, let's let the story mull around in this whole crazy brain of mine and see what comes out at the other end. Mm. Because I never know how it's going to start. I never know how it's going to finish. I don't know what's going to happen all the way through. Because I do not plan these things, Patty. I just sit and start typing. Sometimes it works, and I can be sat at my desk for 12 hours. Because the story is there, it's flowing, and I've got to get it out. Because if I move away and become distracted, then I lose it. In other times, I may get 30 minutes, I might get an hour, and then the story's gone, and I've lost the flow, and I don't know where it's going to go. I have to walk away and wait for it to start building up again and telling me where it wants to go. So it was one of those exercises of just letting it run. And while I was doing other things, the story stayed in my head. And it grew, and it had little branches appear. I thought, yes, I could do that. And yes, that would work. And I'm not sure, I'd better look into that. Until I reached that point where I thought, I'm going to put this down now. It's ready to write. I can feel that if I sit and start tapping away, that it will appear. And for me, the process starts with the cover. As you know, I set a lot of store by the cover. I like my covers. But for me to actually get into that mental place of I'm ready to go, I need a cover. So I looked around until I found something and played with it and put it together. And then when the cover was there, and the face was there, and the image was there, then I had a clearer vision of who Luke was, what he was. And that spurred me on to sitting down. I think I started in the middle of an afternoon. I had a quiet afternoon, and I got the keyboard ready and started tapping away. And it went. And I think the first day I was probably typing for 5 or 6 hours. It gave me the bones of the start of the story, and the rest happened over the period of time. So, and that's what I enjoy about writing, is because for me, I never know from the moment I sit down at the keyboard what's going to happen. I have no idea.
So like a writing adventure.
Yes. I've no idea where it's going to go. I really don't. It could go one way or another. I have started stories in the past based in the erotic genre. And I started because I've had an idea and it's built and it's brewed for a while. And then I've sat down and started typing, and it's gone somewhere completely different. It has turned into something totally different as the story developed. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be at the start. A classic example of that is book 2 of the trilogy, Rising Demon. I know we're going off tack because we were talking about food chain, but it's an example of I turned one of the characters into a complete homicidal sexual maniac. It was never intended to be that. None of that was intended. That wasn't the premise that I had in my head. And people have asked me, why was it so dark? I think it just reflected what was going on around me at the time. I was starting writing again after a long break. Circumstances had changed, become completely different for me. I was very angry and ranty at the world, and that showed in the book. With Food Chain, I had to create that darkness as I was going. I didn't have any point of reference to work with. So when things got dark and dirty in there, when his animalistic instincts were at full flow, I had to get into that place. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were chuckling at me because I was saying that I wrote a sad part to a story, and I was really upset because I was that deep into it, because it is all coming from the pure imagination as I sit in time, that I was upset, and I had to stop and go and raid the coffee pot yet again for the 30 millionth time that day, and take a break, because writing that part of the story upset me. Which I know it sounds strange, but it does. That's the way that I work. I seem to write from emotions rather than intellect. Lots of people would argue I don't have one. So,
who would say that?
Lots of mean people, Patty. Will you get them for me?
I will release the hounds on them.
Good girl. Thank you very much. So that's how it gets. And I found writing Food Chain that it took me a while to come out of those places, to step away from the computer and not have a growly, animalistic feel. I'm sure Molly Dog looked at me.
Be in a room with you when you were in Luke mode.
No, neither would I. And I'm pretty sure Molly Dog looked at me as strange a few times. Oh God! I've just said her name. She just said she's now climbing onto the chair, trying to join you. You can't join me. You've got nothing to say for a start. This is my time. Go away, Dad. So yes, and so I had to walk away a couple of times because it did put me in a darker place. But then conversely, when I'm writing a piece, a section that has a little bit of humour, has a little bit of lightness in it, has a little bit of romance and naughtiness, and my mood changes. And that has taken me a while to get used to how that makes me feel. So I now if I'm going to sit down and write, I do a little mental preparation and maybe even start to get myself into that place prior to writing, get into the feel of the book before I start tapping away, because my fingers seem to follow the inner turmoil or whatever it is that's going on that needs to come out to create the story. And Food Chain was an interesting exercise in, one, going into a completely different genre, writing horror, something I've never contemplated before. But two is basing it on animalistic and feral instincts, very raw and base, rather than the controlled eroticism and desires of a world that I'd written about before, the DS relationships, the world of BDSM. and the lifestyle. An awful lot of that is controlled. The passion scenes are controlled by the dominant. Whereas with Luke, it was a case of letting it run. Just let it run and see what happened. Imagine.
I love the manipulation.
The way he affects people.
Yeah, and also we should do a spoiler part.
Wow.
So
Why is that?
I put a spoiler warning here.
Go on then, you do
and,
that.
And the policewoman.
Yes.
I like the way she manipulated him.
Well, she realised that very quickly that because he was so basic and so driven, with very simple desires, that he had never encountered a woman who actually, who made herself attractive to him, who made herself available for his use, who actually encouraged him and fed those animalistic desires in a way he'd never experienced before, which of course allowed her to live for longer than his other victims. Because it was a case of, I think it blew his mind a little bit. I suppose let's look at an analogy. It would be like a wild cat being taken into somebody's home and suddenly realizing that it gets lots of affection and he gets food when he wants it. And he's going to get cuddles and he's going to get treats and things. He suddenly realized that, wow, this isn't such a bad thing. I get what I want and she's actually making it more pleasurable. So he allowed her a little bit of leeway, and that was all she needed. Because without it, she would not have been alive to do anything. So she bought her way into that at the expense of her body and her sexuality. So you can take the spoiler marker off now, but we won't talk about that anymore.
One spoiler question.
Go on then.
I didn't quite understand the naming part. He thinks about how he got his name, or he tells the policewoman, I don't remember.
Yeah.
And why did the other girl call him Luke?
It was the name that she gave him, because he didn't have a name. Because he didn't know who he was. The concept of name was as alien to him as it would be to the fox that lives down the bottom of your garden. It has no concept of name. So...
You don't know that.
That's very true. You might have the only sentient, self-aware fox on Earth, Patty, that lives at the bottom of your garden, that thinks of himself as Reginald.
Or George. I think he's more George.
You think he's more George? Well, that could be very true. That could be very true. So she gave him the name. She called him Luke because for her it also personalized him. She, if you remember in the story, was trying to connect to him because it would allow her to live. And she wanted to live, obviously. We all want to live. So she gave him a name to personalize him, to give him an identity that she could relate to, and she hoped that he would relate to it back, but of course he didn't. But he took the name. And it was because it was the only time anybody had ever referred to him other than as a creature, had seen him as a creature, an object to be feared and killed because of his nature. So that is why he took the name Luke, because that's what she called him, and nobody had ever called him anything before. So there you go. That's why he took the name. Right, so we can lose the spoiler tag now then, so we don't spoil it. Well, without me spoiling book 2, there's not really a lot else I can tell you about that, Patty, because obviously book 2 is an expansion of book 1. It takes an awful lot of the aspects of book 1 and moves them to a different location, puts them under different pressures. There are different protagonists come in, to the story, different characters. There are some, at the risk of a little spoiler, there are some of the original characters that move into the second book. I shall tell people that. But which ones live and which ones die, you won't know until you actually read book 1. And I had no idea which ones were going to live and which ones were going to die either until I finished the book. And then, obviously, I'd got people left over that I hadn't killed, or rather, I hadn't killed, Luke hadn't eaten.
Okay, how about we just do a second part after I read it?
Okay, yeah, that seems fair enough. I shall look on Amazon to see that the book has gone out, and I'll have a look at, because they've got the Amazon DE store, so you can purchase it through there. And then once you've read it, then I will consider talking about book 2.
Consider?
Yes. Well, we can't give everything away, Patty. I want people to try and enjoy these things and make their own journey through them. And I don't want to give too much away.
They're supposed to listen to it after they read it.
Oh, right, okay. So when are we going to publish this then? When's this going out? This is going out tomorrow, isn't it? So, folks, what you need to do is turn off now. Right? Turn off now. That's it. Turn it off. Because now the rest of what we say is irrelevant. But if you've read book 1 and you're going to buy book 2, turn off now. Go and read it, and then Patty and I can carry on talking. Just press pause for about a week, finish the book, and then come back. No. This is going out tomorrow. We won't talk about book 2, Patty. I think that'd be a bit naughty. We'll just let people get an idea of book 1, and hopefully they'll go out there and have a look, see what it's all about, and enjoy it. I'm pleased to say that I've had some very positive feedbacks, and people have really enjoyed it. You have expressed enjoyment, which is pleased. Yeah, I'm pleased about that. And I just hope people will move on to book 2, like you should have done.
I'm busy.
Okay. And I don't know whether I'll go back there. I don't know whether I'll revisit the horror genre. I really don't. It depends what stories come to mind. So you'll have to wait and see, Patty.
I will.
Well, I shall leave it there. And if we have anything else interesting to talk about book-wise, if something else appears, then hopefully we can talk through that.
I hope so.
Good. So I shall say good night to you for now, Patty.
Good night, and thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and I shall speak to you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.